past few years, there's been some debate in the film studies community over the question, does the female gaze exist? And to look at this, first we have to establish what the theory, the male gaze, is. The theory comes from Laura Mulvey's paper, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. The paper itself is a little bit, crazy. You know, it's got quotes like, "The presence of women is an indispensable element of spectacle in normal narrative film, yet her visual presence tends to work against the development of storyline." Like, Laura Mulvey also has this whole theory that male audiences can't relate to female characters because they don't have penises. Like, it's some weird stuff. But basically her theory, which has been continued to be built upon by other scholars, is about the way women are framed, often sexually, by the camera. And I did talk a little bit about this in another video, so I will show a clip of that.
Their videos present us with a world where women reward harassing behavior with sex, strip teases, flirting, or just grabbing their friend's big ass in the middle of the street. She is similarly sexualized and objectified by the camera, though not for the expressed purpose of servicing the male audience members. She, just like Lele Pons, is also consistently lusted after by the male characters in these sketches. And, just like in Pons' videos, the male character's debauchery is always rewarded. However, whereas a woman in Pons' video will start grinding on a guy in response to being slapped on the ass, Maxine is regularly the victim of manipulation, abuse, assault, and rape.
So in contrast, does a female gaze exist? And many scholars will tell you that no, it doesn't. Other scholars, though, do use the term. There's no concrete definition, though. Some say what matters is having a female cinematographer or director. Others say what matters is having a female lead in a film aimed at female audiences. But these writers seem to be using the term to describe a female experience or female point of view that is not necessarily sexual, and does not necessarily have anything to do with the portrayal or framing of men. What I want to talk about is literally the male gaze with the genders flipped. How men are presented visually, the use of men in narrative, how sex and sexuality are portrayed. The reason you don't hear people talking about this particular interpretation is because popular consensus states that because all these film techniques were pioneered debatably by men, and the film industry was started, again, highly debatably, by men and is dominated by men, a female reversal can't exist. Even a film like Magic Mike is seen as an inversion. In other words, it uses the male gaze on male bodies, but it's not the female gaze, supposedly. Hell, watch any video on the topic of the male gaze, and one clip you're going to see again and again is the bikini scene from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Yeah, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. A movie directed by a woman. For the purposes of this video, I am defining the female gaze as simply the reversal of the male gaze, and since film was pioneered and is dominated by men, let's look at something that was pioneered and is dominated by women. Fan works, fan art, and fan fiction. So in order to understand the context and how a female gaze came to be in fan works, we have to kind of look at the history of it. Pinpointing when fandom started is really not even possible. If you remember from our Florence Lawrence video, she had a fandom before she even had stardom. But most people point to Trekkies of the 1960s as the beginning of the modern fandom. They published fanzines that contained all kinds of things from how to speak Klingon to thoughts on episodes. These things were mostly written by men, but where women dominated was in fan fiction and fan art. Kirk and Spock is widely considered the first ship. The fanfiction term, Mary Sue, can be traced back to a story in one of these magazines. And right from the very beginning, it was clear that female Trekkies wanted their fave boys to engage in hardcore gay sex as much as any modern Supernatural or Markiplier fangirl does today. According to the book A Brief History of Media Fandom, 90% of all Star Trek fanfiction authors by 1973 were female. Certainly the perception online is that these types of slash fanfictions are all written by horny women who just want to get their rocks off. And 50 Shades of Grey, originally a Twilight fanfic, and all the attention it got from that, does not help that interpretation. But until you go to university and study fine arts, you may never know just how seriously slash fanfic is taken within academia. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. Slash fic is seen as this rebellious art form that co-opts mainstream heterosexual stories and makes them really, really gay. And in recent years, we've seen fanfics incorporate not just really heavy gay and lesbian themes, but trans themes as well. So we have these two clashing ideas, which both hold true. One, that these are pornographic stories, either sexual or emotional porn, written to allow their mostly female readers to indulge. And two, that these are LGBT people expressing themselves through their favorite characters and stories. And both of them are true, but we're mostly going to be focusing on the straight women's perspective. Could be an interesting video for the future though, I don't know. So it all kind of comes down to this argument of like, does it matter who is producing the work? And it's kind of the ultimate film studies question, like auteurism versus receptionism. It's this big debate, like, is it more important the director's intent or the audience's interpretation of a work? Like, what truly is the thing that gives it meaning or has the most important meaning? And they're both kind of equal. Let's go back to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, directed by a woman, Amy Heckerling. It's got this male gaze scene, which is inarguably a male gaze scene. It's the masturbation fantasy of one of the male characters. The film is full of other female nudity, but it's framed as more awkward and uncomfortable. So it brings up this point, like, what counts? Fast Times does seem to be aiming at a mostly male audience. Stacy is naked in these scenes, but it's framed as, like, pathetic rather than sexy. Or like a teenage boy seeing an attractive naked girl in a movie is probably gonna think it's pretty sexy no matter how it's framed, you know? What about The Matrix? From the time it came out until now, there have been all kinds of essays on the meaning of that movie. Well before Lana and Lily Wachowski came out as trans, there were all kinds of people analyzing the movie as an LGBT metaphor. But now that we know they're trans women, does that automatically make that interpretation correct? Like, I just wonder if Lana and Lily had been out back in 1999, do you think people would have just taken the entire thing as a metaphor for being trans and, like, never given it a second thought? Like, oh, well, that must be it. I mean, look at the directors, you know? But fanfic is unique from film and books and TV and music because it's totally anonymous, aside from rare cases. So when it comes to fanfic and fanart, it actually truly does not matter who made it. If you look at a lot of the online fandoms dominated by women, you'll find that the media at the center of it is not particularly that feminine. Supernatural, Doctor Who, Harry Potter, Star Wars, YouTuber fandoms tend to skew a little younger, and many of these YouTubers cater their content to their young female fans, but the ones that don't even come close to doing that have just as many female fans making similar content surrounding them. So the first thing I want to look at in fan art is how males are portrayed, specifically sexually. They tend to be drawn a lot more femininely than traditional images of sexually charged males. Traditional ideas of sexually desirable males are usually built around power, but as you can see in fan art, that's often not the case. In fact, the exact opposite tends to be true. Even the tamer pieces, which are not outright pornographic, feature men in poses and with expressions much more reminiscent of female pinup poses rather than male ones. What I want to talk about is a very specific type of fanfic, which is the self-insert fanfiction. I think that'll give us a good idea on the sort of female fantasy. And I really do hate to be using such broad terms, you know, female fantasy, male fantasy. Those don't really exist and encompass everyone. And plenty of these same exact types of fan works are made by males. But unfortunately, when it comes to feminist film theory, it kind of forces you to like paint people with a really broad brush because that's just how the theories were built. A self-insert is a fanfic in which the main character is an original character based on the author or the author's ideal self. These types of fanfics still exist as far as I can tell, although a new variation has popped up in recent years. I'm sure you've heard the term Mary Sue thrown around a lot, but a self-insert character and a Mary Sue are not the same thing, although there is often a lot of overlap. Common traits of the self-insert protagonist include overly attractive and fashionable. Often an unnecessary amount of time is spent describing their appearances or clothing. Desirable, sometimes to the point where they are being fought over by multiple characters. Smart and competent. If they are magical, they are the most magical. If it's a sci-fi type setting, they have the best technology, etc. So traditionally, the author would introduce their self-insert character, explain how they fit into the canon, and, write them like any other literary protagonist. But we've seen recently this idea of self-insert fantasy being pushed even further with the concept of the reader fic. So basically, instead of having a stand-in, they just cut the bullshit and say, you, the reader, are the protagonist. One site that tends to have a younger user base, and where you'll find a lot of these, is Wattpad. These stories are like an absolute slog to try and read, just from the clunkiness of the way they're written. I'll give you an example. Hey Kenny, how are you doing? A young girl with long, short hair asks a young boy wearing an orange parka. He happens to be her best friend, Kenny McCormick. She was known as your name, last name, one of the most toughest girls in South Park. She's tough at times, but when she's around her best friend, she always reveals her soft side to him. Not all of them are that extreme. Some of them will actually describe the clothes and the hairstyles and stuff, but they all vary. Just type in reader to Wattpad and you are going to find over 500,000 results of sexual and or romantic stories about you, the reader, hooking up with everyone from Harry Styles and Jake Paul to Michelangelo of the Ninja Turtles, the Spy Kids, and Pennywise. All of these stories slightly differ in who the reader is. Sometimes she's the every girl who just so happens to meet her crush through some crazy circumstances. Sometimes she's the girl next door who her celeb crush only just starts to notice. In other cases, it's a total all-out fantasy, as in the case with this Jake Paul fanfic I found, where the reader is a far more popular YouTuber than Jake, and is doing him a favor by joining Team 10 and fucking all of its male members. But I think if we're gonna talk about the classic self-insert, we have to talk about the big one. My Immortal. And I realize this is a bit of a controversial topic, a lot of debate on is it real? Is it fake? There was some bitch recently who came forward and was like, I wrote it to find my brother, and that turned out to be a huge lie. Obviously nobody wrote this to find their brother. They wrote it for the same reason anyone writes any fanfiction, to be self-indulgent. Even if it is a troll fic, it was clearly written by someone who was parodying a very specific type of fanfiction that was prevalent at this time. Part of the reason it's become so infamous and also beloved is because it's such a perfect representation of bad fanfiction. That is why My Immortal is the perfect candidate for examination. It hits every single cliche. Who is Enemy Darkness, Dementia Ravenway? She's stylish, incredibly fashion-forward.
I opened the bag. In it was a sexy, tight, low, smut, black leather gothic dress. It had red corset stuff, and there was a slit up the leg. I put it on. My friends helped me put on black fishnets and black pointy boots Willow had chosen. Willow and Darkness helped me put on black eyeliner and blood red lipstick.
Sexually desired by nearly every single character in the story.
No, she doesn't fucking like you, you son of a bitch, yelled Draco. No, fuck you, motherfucker. She laves me, not you, shouted Vampire.
She's all-powerful, the only one capable of stopping Voldemort. She's a musical genius, such an incredible singer that she is begged to join people's bands. Her many, many flaws are always portrayed in a positive light. Her incredible mood swings, her irrational paranoia, emotional abuse, her loud, obnoxious personality, her hostility towards her friends, these are all seen as very, very good things. My Immortal is also infamous for its many, many horribly written, gratuitous sex scenes. But what does it really mean? Literally can no character, attractive or unattractive, resist Ebony, but all of Ebony's desirable suitors forego their canon personalities in order to fulfill her ideal male fantasy. Wussified goth bisexuals. But why is bisexuality so important to Tara Gillespie, whoever she may be or may be parodying? She wants cute boys to fuck her, but she also wants cute boys to fuck each other so that she can watch. And at the end of the day, isn't that what this all boils down to? Cute boys? There's a reason Justin Bieber's girlfriends keep having to privatize their Instagram because of floods of mean comments, whereas meanwhile, you know, like Joey Graceffa and Shane Dawson, their boyfriends are welcomed with open arms. It's like, girl? A girl? You with a girl? That's bullshit. That should be me. That should be me. Ladies. Actually, it turns out I'm into dudes. Oh, well, that's okay. I mean, he's hot too, so, you know, I'm cool with that. So that was just a little taste on my take on the female gaze. If you'd like me to ever do a follow-up video in the future where we can take the theory and look at something more specific, or look at more fan works, I'd be totally open to that. Or if you have ideas for other videos, leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, please do consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time, and hopefully next time will not be as long as this, because this was ridiculous. But you know, I was moving, and it was the holidays, and there was like a ton of stuff going on, so thank you.